He burst into the emergency room like a storm in a suit, the scent of expensive cologne trailing him. Dr. Quotenade. Edward Harrington, a 50-year-old neurosurgeon whose name adorned hospital wings and philanthropic galas, slammed his fist on the check-in desk. "What is taking so long?" he barked, eyes darting between the monitors and the motionless sliding doors. Across from him stood Nurse Maria Sanchez. She was in her 30s, ponytail poking out from beneath a scrub cap, dark circles under her eyes, evidence of another 12-hour shift. She did not flinch at his tone. "Dr. Harrington," she said calmly, "we have 3 trauma victims in surgery and 2 codes in progress. We're doing our best." "Your best isn't good enough," Edward snapped. His wife had texted him 15 minutes ago to say their teenage son, Alex, had fallen in gym class and hit his head. A CT scan had revealed a subdural hematoma that needed immediate intervention. Edward had been in the middle of a fundraising lunch with other hospital donors when the call came. He'd driven himself to the hospital faster than any ambulance. Now he felt powerless. "I demand to see my son. I'm chief of neurosurgery. I don't wait in lines." Maria held his gaze. "Right now, Dr. Williams is operating on your son. You know the policy. You can't scrub in when you're emotionally involved. We need you to trust us." Edward felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Someone saying no to him. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Do you know who I am? I could have your job for this." Maria's lips tightened. "Do you know who I am? I'm the nurse keeping 3 other children from dying tonight. Threaten me all you want, but don't slow me down." For a moment, the world slowed. Edward, used to compliance, blinked. Then he scoffed and turned away, pacing the corridor, glaring at the clock as if intimidation could make time bend. Behind him, Maria continued triaging patients, coordinating with surgeons, flipping through charts. She never raised her voice, never broke stride, even when another family began crying in the waiting room. Edward caught snippets of her reassuring words, her quick directions. He noticed the way every resident and orderly seemed to orbit around her steady calm. It grated at him. How dare she seem so composed when his world was unraveling? If this clash between privilege and purpose grabs you, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss how one man's arrogance will be turned inside out by a secret buried decades ago. Edward's rise to prominence had been meteoric. Born to middle-class parents, he had been a gifted student who hustled through medical school on scholarships and loans. His talent with a scalpel caught the attention of wealthy patrons. By 35, he was saving senators and celebrities. By 40, he'd founded a research institute. He donated millions to build state-of operating rooms, always with his name etched above the door. With success came entitlement. Nurses often joked behind his back that he demanded to be treated like royalty. He'd snap if his coffee wasn't the right temperature. He fired an intern once for mispronouncing his name. He justified it all as the price of excellence. "People fear me because they know I won't accept mediocrity," he told his colleagues. Few dared to disagree. In the waiting room, he remembered none of his generosity. All he could think about was Alex. His son had inherited his quick mind, but none of his arrogance yet. There were times when Edward worried he didn't spend enough time with Alex, that he compensated with expensive summer camps and state-of-art laptops. He pushed the thought aside. He had to be strong, not sentimental. Maria's defiance replayed in his mind. Who was this nurse to challenge him, and why did her face feel vaguely familiar? Maria, meanwhile, took a minute between emergencies to gulp water. She had been a nurse for 10 years. She never lost patience with patients, but doctors sometimes tested her. She recognized Edward's name instantly. Everyone did. She also recognized the way he threw his privilege around, like a weapon. What he didn't know was that she had a weapon of her own, knowledge of a truth that predated his fame. She touched the locket hanging under her scrubs, feeling the cool metal against her skin. Inside was a tiny photograph of a 6-year-old boy with hazel eyes and a gap in his front teeth. A boy she'd never met, but whose life she had saved decades ago. The doors finally opened, and Dr. Williams emerged, peeling off his gloves. He looked exhausted but relieved. Subdural evacuated. No complications. He's stable in recovery. Edward exhaled so sharply it was almost a laugh. He rushed toward Dr. Williams, pumping his hand. Thank you, Jeremy." He turned to Maria. his pride not yet softened enough to apologize. "Can I see him now?" "Give the sedation another 15 minutes, Dr. Williams said. Then one parent at a time." He patted Edward's shoulder. "You did the right thing by not scrubbing in. He'll recover." Edward nodded and sat down, feeling simultaneously drained and embarrassed. He glanced up to see Maria watching him. There was no smugness in her eyes, only something that looked like understanding. 2 days later, Edward sat at Alex's bedside. His son was grumpy, itching at the IV taped to his arm. "Dad, I'm fine," Alex protested. "Why are you staring at me like I almost died?" Edward laughed weakly. "Because you almost did." He smoothed Alex's hair. "I'm sorry I've been distant, son. Work consumed me." Alex rolled his eyes. "It's okay. You save brains for a living. Mom says I should be grateful you're not an accountant." Edward smiled, but guilt gnawed at him. He owed his son more time, more presence. He vowed to be better. As he left the room, he saw Maria at the nurse's station, writing notes. He walked up, prepared to offer a stiff apology. "Nurse Sanchez," he began. She looked up with mild surprise. "Yes, doctor? I want to apologize for how I spoke to you. I was worried." The words tasted foreign in his mouth. Maria tilted her head. "Worried is understandable. Disrespect isn't, but apology accepted." She offered a small smile. Edward nodded, embarrassed. "Thank you, for what you did for my son." "It's my job," she replied simply. "And it isn't the first time I've done something for you, Dr. Harrington." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Maria glanced around to ensure no one else was listening. "Do you remember being 12 and being very sick?" Edward blinked. I had leukemia. The memories were fuzzy. Weeks in a hospital, chemo that burned like acid, his mother crying quietly in the hallway. I almost died." "You needed a bone marrow transplant," Maria said quietly. She pulled her locket from under her scrubs and opened it. Inside was the photo of the boy. "This is you." He stared. He recognized his own childlike grin immediately. "What? How?" "I was 10, Maria said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "They said a little girl's marrow was a match for a boy with leukemia. My parents didn't hesitate. The surgery left scars I still have." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a faint, silvery mark near her elbow. "Your parents wrote a thank you letter. For years, I wondered if the boy lived. I became a nurse because I wanted to see the faces of the people we save. I recognized your name on hospital plaques. Then I recognized your face in the hallway. But you didn't recognize mine." Edward stared at the scar, at the picture, at the nurse who had saved his life before he had the chance to become anyone at all. The room seemed to sway. You're the donor?" Maria nodded. "So, when you came in here screaming at me, well, I couldn't let you throw your weight around without pushing back. Not when I'd already carried your weight once." Her expression softened. "I'm glad you're alive, doctor. I'm glad your son is alive, too." Edward swallowed hard. A rush of shame, gratitude, and awe flooded him. He had built an empire on the foundation of second chances granted by a child. A child who now stood before him, grown into a calm, competent woman, quietly saving lives while he basked in accolades. He felt something crack in his chest. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Maria shrugged. "You were always surrounded by crowds, by titles. I didn't want to be another person asking you for anything. I just wanted to see if the boy I saved grew into a good man, and sometimes he did." She smiled, teasing. Other times, he needed a reminder. Edward laughed weakly, tears stinging his eyes. "I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem enough." As the words hung between them, a memory took hold in Edward's mind, not of boardrooms or operating theaters, but of being a sickly child in a cramped pediatric ward. He remembered the sour tang of medications, the way his mother's hand shook when she fed him ice chips, the whispered conversations his parents had when they thought he was sleeping. He remembered an unfamiliar little girl in the bed across the hall, dark braids and bright eyes, who smiled at him even when he couldn't muster one in return. He had no idea then that she would one day save him twice. Maria noticed his faraway expression and decided to tell him more, to fill in the gaps left by time. "After I donated," she said, "I missed a week of school. Kids teased me about my bandage." My mom had to pick up extra shifts. But every time my arm throbbed, my dad would say, "That's your hero's ache. Wear it with pride." He kept the thank you letter in the family Bible. We'd read it on birthdays and holidays. It was our reminder that even when we struggled to pay rent or had to share one chicken among 5 plates, we had done something rich people couldn't buy with all their money. We'd given someone a future. Edward listened, his throat tight. He realized that while he had grown up to accept praise as his birthright, Maria had grown up to find purpose in quiet sacrifice. Her life had been shaped by an act of giving, his by an act of receiving. The imbalance humbled him. "It's enough if you mean it," Maria said, "and if you do something with it." The revelation shook Edward to his core. For days, he replayed the moment over and over. He told his wife and Alex, who insisted on hugging Maria at the next appointment. "You saved my dad," Alex said, eyes wide. "So you saved me." Maria blushed and laughed, but accepted the gratitude with grace. Edward returned to work humbled. He sat in his corner office, looking at the awards and framed newspaper clippings that celebrated his achievements. He realized that each success was possible because a 10-year-old girl and her parents had chosen compassion over fear. His donors hadn't saved him. A family with far less than he had stepped forward without hesitation. He called the hospital's philanthropic board to propose a new program, a scholarship fund for young donors and transplant recipients pursuing healthcare careers. He insisted it be named after Maria's family, not his own. "We need to honor the invisible heroes," he said. "People like Maria who quietly carry others." The board was surprised. Dr. Harrington rarely deferred his own recognition. They voted unanimously in favor. Later that week, Edward drove to the modest suburb where he'd grown up. He parked outside the weathered blue house where his mother still lived. The front porch creaked the same way it had when he ran up and down as a boy. Inside, his mother hummed a hymn in the kitchen, kneading dough. When she saw him, she wiped her hands on her apron and hugged him fiercely. "They told me at church about your new scholarship," she said, eyes shining. "Maria came to see me, you know. She wanted to thank me for raising a son who valued her family." Edward winced. "Mom, I valued the wrong things for too long. I yelled at the woman who saved my life." His mother cupped his face. "I prayed every day when you were sick. I promised God that if He let you live, you would do good in the world. I think you've kept that promise, but not because of the buildings with your name, because of the hearts you've touched. Maybe this is your second chance to remember that." They sat at the kitchen table, eating warm bread and telling stories about his late father, the man who taught him to fix cars when he could barely see over the hood, who told him humility was the mark of true greatness. Edward realized how far he had strayed from those lessons. He vowed to honor them again. He also changed his own behavior. He started saying thank you to nurses, asking residents about their day, showing up to birthday parties and soccer games. He spent afternoons volunteering at free clinics, performing surgeries pro bono. Some colleagues whispered he was angling for good press. He ignored them. He wasn't interested in appearances anymore. He was interested in impact. One afternoon at a downtown clinic, he sutured the hand of an elderly man named Ricardo who reminded him of Maria's father. The man told Edward about working double shifts to send his daughter to nursing school. "She wants to be a doctor one day," Ricardo said proudly, oblivious to who was stitching him up. Edward's throat tightened. "Make sure she knows she already is one in here," he replied, tapping his chest. When the man left, Edward sat alone in the tiny exam room and wept not out of sorrow, but out of release. For all the years he had equated value with titles instead of hearts. He finally understood that true worth was measured by hands that heal and voices that comfort, not plaques on walls. If this story about hidden connections and humility resonates with you, leave a comment and share it. Your support helps us tell more stories like this, stories where arrogance meets its match in unexpected heroes. Months passed. Maria noticed the change. Dr. Harrington still expected excellence, but no longer weaponized his status. One night, as she walked to her car after a long shift, he caught up with her. "Maria," he said, slightly out of breath. "I've been thinking." She raised an eyebrow. About your career," he said. "You're wasted at triage. Your clinical judgment is exceptional. Have you thought about going to medical school? I can sponsor you. or, if you prefer, a nurse practitioner program with full tuition. I owe you my life. Let me help shape yours." Maria stared at him, stunned. "You don't owe me anything, doctor. I chose to donate. My family chose. I owe you everything," he insisted. "But this isn't charity. It's investment. The hospital needs more leaders like you. Alex needs role models like you. I need to pay forward what you did for me." Maria smiled slowly. "You know, when I was little, I wanted to be a doctor. But my parents couldn't afford the tuition. I became a nurse because we needed income sooner. I love my work, but sometimes I wonder what if." "Let's find out," Edward said. "I'll cover every expense, and when you graduate, you can decide where you want to work, even if it's not here." Tears filled Maria's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said, gently. "Say you'll let me be part of your next chapter, the way you were part of my first." Maria took a deep breath. "Yes." That evening, Maria sat at her kitchen table with her parents and her younger brother, Tomas. She laid out the offer letter Edward had already drawn up. "It's a full ride," she whispered, almost afraid the words would disappear. Her mother covered her mouth, eyes brimming. "Mija, this is everything you dreamed." Her father, now with more gray in his hair, shook his head in wonder. "We thought it was too late, Hija, that you had to give up your dream so we could pay bills." Maria squeezed their hands. "I didn't give it up. It just took a different path. And I won't leave nursing behind. I will bring it with me." They spent hours talking about logistics, night classes she might have to take, the mortgage they'd finally paid off, the community that would lose a beloved nurse. "They'll manage," her mother insisted. "They managed when you gave a piece of your body. They will manage when you grow your mind." Maria went to bed that night with her heart pounding, not with fear, but with possibility. 3 years later, Dr. Maria Sanchez walked across the stage at her medical school graduation. Her parents, now retired, cried in the front row. Edward, his wife, Alex, and other surgeons cheered loudest. Maria received the Dean's Award for Compassionate Leadership. Reporters asked about her journey. She told them about a bone marrow donation at 10, about a surgeon's temper at 35, about how 2 lives intertwined twice by sheer chance and choice. The headline the next day read, "From donor to doctor, the nurse who saved her future mentor before they met." At the celebratory dinner, Edward raised a glass. "To Maria," he said. "To the little girl who saved my life, and the woman who saved my soul." Maria laughed and shook her head. "To our patients," she corrected. "They're the reason we're here." Alex, now a college freshman studying biomedical engineering, chimed in, "To paying it forward." In the epilogue of his life, Edward found that the richest reward wasn't another wing with his name on it. It was watching someone else's name, Maria Sanchez, go up on a door. It was hearing his son talk about empathy and community instead of profits and prestige. It was knowing that his worst moment yelling at a nurse in a crisis had been alchemized into his best outcome. After Maria's graduation, the scholarship program they founded blossomed. Over the next decade, dozens of young donors and transplant recipients entered nursing and medical school. At annual dinners, Edward watched as rows of graduates, many of them first-generation college students, stood on stage in white coats. Each time, he thought of Maria's scar, of his own second chance. "The Maria Sanchez Fellowship saved my daughter's life as much as any transplant," one father said tearfully at a gala. "Not her physical life, her future." Maria used part of her signing bonus to renovate the free clinic where she and Edward had first worked together. She installed updated equipment, created a fund to pay for medications, and opened an evening clinic staffed by volunteers. On Tuesday nights, she and Edward worked side by side, she as the attending physician and he as the assistant. "How the tables have turned," he joked, handing her instruments. She grinned. "Don't worry, doctor. I won't fire you for mispronouncing my name." As the years rolled on, Edward retired from full-time surgery, focusing on teaching and philanthropy. Maria became a mentor to countless nurses and medical students, telling them her story how a child from an immigrant family saved a stranger and was later lifted up by that very stranger. She insisted on teaching empathy alongside anatomy. "Remember that every patient is someone's world," she would say. "Remember that you might be here because of a decision someone made for you before you were even born." Her words echoed through lecture halls, leaving students in tears and with renewed purpose. If you've been moved by this story of hidden heroes, redemption, and the power of gratitude, please like and share. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more tales that prove wealth and titles mean nothing without the hearts of those who lift us up when we don't deserve it.